We went vegan in 2018. And then in the fall of 2019, I got up for work, came home, and was trying to peel shrimp as we were moving towards a pescatarian diet, and my hands wouldn't work. By the next day, I could barely walk. The hardest part was my neurologist told me by the time I was 50, I'm 47 now. He told me by the time I was 50, I would probably be in a wheelchair. Last year, we went carnivore. 2 months, 60 days of straight just beef, water, salt. Within a couple weeks, my pain was under control for the first time in 5 years. If I had known then what I know now, I would have never done vegan. I probably would have been healthier. And then I always questioned, was vegan the one thing that caused my autoimmune disease to turn on?
Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. Hey, if you or someone you love is suffering from chronic disease and you're tired of just managing symptoms with potions, pills, and procedures, I want you to check out Revero.com. Our team of dedicated professionals is committed to tackling the root cause of your issue and finally getting you healthy. Hurry up, though. Our spaces are filling up very quickly. We have Renee with us, who's our guest. Renee, maybe you would share your background eating meat to walk. I remember now. So this is a redo. All right, let's start again. Welcome, Renee. Let's start with your background.
So, hi, Dr. Baker. Thanks for having me. I have been a nurse for 22 years and been all in allopathic medicine. In 2010, I was diagnosed with idiopathic gastroparesis, and that's where the stomach stops moving. So I was very malnourished and in and out of the hospital getting fluids and couldn't keep anything down, really sick. And at that time, I was working as a night nursing supervisor in a hospital. So trying to work full time and run a hospital and being really sick was no fun. So that started years of yo-yo dieting, trying to figure out what to eat. And my gastroenterologist, when he diagnosed me over the phone, told me eat white food, potato chips, ice cream, anything white that's easy to digest. Stay away from meat, stay away from nuts, stay away from seeds, stay away from vegetables. I mean, it was really not a whole lot of information. And so that started years of trying to figure out what would work and what wouldn't. So we did everything from paleo to Mediterranean to vegan. We went vegan in 2018. And then in the fall of 2019, I got up for work and worked out that morning like I did every morning before I went to work. And I worked for 8 hours, came home, and was trying to peel shrimp as we were moving towards a pescatarian diet, and my hands wouldn't work. By the next day, I could barely walk. And unfortunately, it took a couple of months for a diagnosis because it kind of looked like it could have been Guillain-Barré, but that starts from the feet up, and I started in my hands down. So finally got diagnosed in around February of 2020 with chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, which is a form of Guillain-Barré. It's a chronic form, and had a lot of demyelinating of my nerves in my hands and my feet. And I was really weak on my left side. You know, it was really hard to walk and couldn't do anything with my hands anymore. And I'm a nurse still, and I couldn't start an IV. I haven't started an IV since I got sick that day. It made life very difficult. And unfortunately, I got diagnosed the same time that COVID hit. And so it was very difficult trying to figure out how to manage work with treatment. So my first treatment that I went on was high dose IVIG. So that's 5 days of IVIG, and it's 2 bottles a day at $10,000 a bottle. So a week's worth of treatment was $100,000. Luckily, I have insurance, and I just paid copays, but still. And by the time I started my first round of IVIG, I was on gabapentin already, and I went really fast to the maxed out dose. So I have, for the last 5 years, been on 3,600 milligrams of gabapentin a day. And I was on nortriptyline and duloxetine. So nothing was touching the nerve pain, though. Halfway through my first treatment, I could walk again without assistance. So it worked. I still was on a ton of meds. And so I did IVIG for a couple of years, back and forth with work and trying to figure out how to juggle all of it. And IVIG, I was getting a week-long treatment, and on Wednesday of that week, I developed a really bad neck pain and really bad headache, like the worst I had had in my life. And so went to the ER and ended up with atypical meningitis, which is a side effect that can happen from IVIG. I got treated with high-dose steroids, sent home, and the next day went back to the infusion clinic and finished my IVIG for the week with a lot of steroids. At that point, my neurologist said that I had failed IVIG, and I went on to do a monthly IVIG instead of doing a full week at one time. And I failed that really fast. It didn't work. So at this point, I'm having awful pain, like can't control it. And I'm weak on my left side. I am not making it to work as much as I should be making it to work. And at this point, my disease caused me to not be able to be a nursing supervisor anymore because I couldn't work on the floor. So I actually ended up applying for a promotion and was promoted to director of patient care, which is what I didn't want to do. I wanted to be on the floor, but at least I had an office job. So I started rituximab once I failed IVIG, and rituximab is a monoclonal antibody and hit my immune system hard. I ended up getting sick all the time. Somebody would just look at me and I would get sick. I had COVID and the flu and pneumonia, and it just kept it was a revolving door. And it really didn't help my pain too much. So by the January of 2024, I was walking with a cane and uncontrolled pain, couldn't get it no matter what I tried. And I was smoking marijuana. It didn't touch it. Nothing touched my pain. I would come home in tears and cry all night, get in a hot shower, hoping that the heat would take the pain away. Nerve pain and neuropathy is no fun. Like I used to, guess I kind of, how you listen to patients talk about chronic pain and talk about neuropathy and you're just like, yeah. You don't realize how bad it is until you have it. And I was pretty much at my end. Like I was over it. In July of 2023, I almost died of COVID. When you have nothing to fight with, it's awful. And then we went to my son's graduation from boot camp in end of February of 2024. And I came home with COVID again. And I just, I told my husband, I'm done. Like I've had depression and anxiety my whole life, and I've already had a couple of suicide attempts, and I just told him I'm done. Our son was getting ready to graduate high school, our last one. And I said, I can't do this anymore. And he was getting ready to leave for work one day, and he's like, just watch some Carnivore. He had been on me about Carnivore and how he had come across it, and he had thought that maybe it would be a great thing for us. And so I watched some Carnivore videos. I saw Carrie Mann first, and then right after him, Michaela Peterson, and then right after him, you and Dr. Barry and Dr. Chafee. And I just kept watching videos. I spent the whole day watching him. I texted him like an hour into it, and I was like, if you don't want to do this, tell me now because we're going for it. And so March 20th of last year, we went Carnivore, and I did Lion for the first 2 months, 60 days of straight just beef, water, salt. And within a couple weeks, my pain was under control for the first time in 5 years. I could control it. And it was like a 2 to 3. It was phenomenal. And I told my husband at that point, like, if I don't gain my walking back completely, or I don't gain other stuff back, I would do this forever just to have the pain gone. So I knew at that point that there was no going backwards. And the nurse in me fought this because I was like, there's no way that I'm going to be okay on just meat. We're taught that's not a healthy diet. And my neurologist, when I told him I was going to try it, he actually told me that I was a nurse and I knew better. And that was not a balanced diet, and that he does not condone it and he will not support it. So I said, well, I'm going to try it anyway. What do I have to lose? So in desperation, I came to Carnivore, and Carnivore, I haven't used my cane that sits behind me in my office now to remind me, but I haven't used it since September. And I have a lot of PT and OT I still have to do to regain what I've lost. But overall, I'm doing amazing. I had an EMG repeated at the end of December and antibodies drawn, and my antibodies were 0 and my EMG was normal. So my neurologist says that I'm in remission and he doesn't know how it happened. I do, and I told him, but he doesn't know how it happened. He says it's a miracle and just go with it. So in a nutshell, that's really what brought me to where I am now.
Yeah, it's such an incredible story. I just going back to the beginning, you've got, gastroparesis of idiopathic, your stomach doesn't properly empty, probably a lot of nausea, probably some vomiting, I imagine, around that. And at least they gave you nutrition advice, although it was stupid. Just eat white stuff. I mean, it's like that, that was, I had to get a little chuckle with that, but at least someone had mentioned nutrition. And then because you said your $100,000 infusions for a week of infusions plus rituximab, which ain't cheap either. How much money would you estimate was spent? Now, granted, you didn't directly pay for it, but we all did through our premiums and all the other stuff. But how much money do you think you spent on this disease before coming to Carnivore?
Well, I would guess it was at least $200,000 a year times 5 years.
That's $1 million.
So I'm worth close to $1 million probably.
Yeah.
And that's not including the meds I pay for every month. So gabapentin, duloxetine, nortriptyline. And I mean, granted, none of those are really expensive drugs. They're all generic and they've been on the market for a while. But then I would also look at the, marijuana wasn't cheap and it really didn't work. I mean, I was trying everything. So probably worth $1 million.
Well, yeah. Well, you could argue you wasted $1 million or something on stuff that didn't do it. I guess I guess it's hard to put a value on. I mean, it gave you a temporary respite. I would say it sounds like a little. You might have had a little bit of improvement with the IV infusion. Sounds like, but the rest of it was, being on that maxed out dose of gabapentin has side effects, as I'm sure you're aware. Probably felt like a zombie with that, I would imagine. I don't know, maybe not.
I can tell you that I'm not like other people. Some people can only get to like 300 milligrams and they just are done. And I didn't do that. I went really fast up it. And the only thing that I noticed was that I wasn't as sharp as I used to be. Like I am one of those people, I'm a very quick mind and it's always going. And I realized it was muted a lot. So I am now currently only taking 1,200 a day. So I've gotten rid of my morning dose and my midday dose, and all I take is my nighttime dose. And I've been weaning off of it since November. So I still have, I have 4 more weans basically until I'm off of it completely. I've stopped nortriptyline and duloxetine within a month of being on Carnivore. And all that was left was the gabapentin. And it was just my neurologist. We lived in Hawaii when I got sick, and that's where we were. And I retired from the hospital in February of last year. I applied for retirement, I retired actually in October. And then we moved to the mainland because when we decided to move, I was at the point where rituximab was the last treatment for my diagnosis. And so it was looking at clinical trials. And so we knew that we needed to get closer to clinical trials. So we pulled the trigger to move and pulled the trigger to retire prior to starting Carnivore. I believe that we're where we're supposed to be. So I'm not worried about the fact that we moved to the mainland and now I'm better, because I still have a neurologist that still is at clinical trials if I absolutely needed to. But I don't see ever going back. And do you know how much meat I could have bought for $1 million?
Yeah. You could have bought a lot for sure. Goodness.
Right.
So what is the, CIDP, chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, for those that haven't heard that? What is the typical course of that? How many people typically go into full remission, or how many people, do you know anything, stats on that?
So according to the foundation, and I'm going to preface what the foundation has, what the foundation is supported by all of the drug companies. If you go on their website, it's all advertisements for the drugs that are out there to treat the disease. So few people go into remission. Sometimes it can be like MS where it goes in and out. I never had a reprieve up until I started Carnivore, even with the drugs. So my neurologist had told me, I think that where my desperation came from, besides the uncontrolled pain, which really makes it is so hard to live your life with uncontrolled pain. I think that the hardest part was my neurologist told me by the time I was 50, I'm 47 now. He told me by the time I was 50, I would probably be in a wheelchair. And when we were looking at houses in the mainland, he was like, make sure you get something that's wheelchair accessible. He said, because you're going to need it. And so the progression is different for different people. A lot of people lose their ability to walk fast. And it's the weakness mostly because your muscles, your myelin sheaths the nerves don't work. And so nothing gets sent to your muscles and then you become weak. And I mean, when I was at the worst part of this disease, I couldn't wash my own hair. In fact, my hair was shorter than yours for years. Like I kept a high and tight because I couldn't wash my hair. Sometimes I couldn't brush my teeth. I mean, it's really hard to explain how vulnerable that makes you to have your husband do things for you that are your normal. Like I should be able to brush my teeth. That's just part of, and so that part of it was really difficult. And the rituximab went in to kill the B cells. They theorized that the B cells are what are attacking the myelin sheaths. And that's just part of your immune system. And so kill all the B cells, it's not going to attack your myelin sheaths. So what rituximab did for me was it was supposed to slow the progression. There was no cure. It wasn't curing it. It wasn't making it go away. It was just slowing it and hopefully buying a couple more years of walking. And I have always been on my feet. I've worked out my entire adult life. I have lifted weights. I was weightlifting when I got sick, and it was really difficult to go from that to not even being able to brush my teeth.
Wow. Wow. You had mentioned in your initial discussion that you looked and there are no more antibodies. So we have anti-MAG or MAG antibodies, and there's some other ones that are associated with this issue. And so that's got to be kind of unusual to see it go from whatever it was to zero. And then also the EMGs, electromyograms, which are myograms rather, which most people aren't familiar with. Maybe you can discuss those two, the significance of that. Was a neurologist previous to this information? I'm sure. Well, they were the one that did the EMG, so they had to know that. So how did that discussion go?
So I had the EMG where they did the electrodes, and then then my neurologist came in after she finished with the electrode one, and he did the needle. And so with the needle one, it was they only did my left side because my left side has been my weak side. And so he did it in the bicep and in the wrist, in the thigh, in the ankle, in the calf, and all it's measuring, right, is the electrode, making sure that the nerves are getting the electricity and that the muscles are getting the electricity and that it's doing what it's supposed to do. And it came back completely normal. So
this is the MCV part. Yeah.
The conversation was quite interesting.
Sorry. It's called a nerve conduction velocity study where they basically just send an electrical signal and they figure out how fast it goes. And if it's going real slow, there's a problem. Like, there's something broken with the myelin or something else. And so normal. That's amazing.
Right. And so we did the EMG, and then I had a doctor's appointment with him right after we were finished with the EMG. And he, there was a quick conversation that maybe I had been misdiagnosed in the beginning, and maybe I really didn't have it because the antibodies weren't there. And I mean, I gave him my chart from Kaiser when I moved from Hawaii, and it was like this thick. Like he has all of the documentation. But it's easier to think that I was misdiagnosed than to think that I had reversed it. And he was like, I don't know where your antibodies are.
But you had positive antibodies on another
Yes.
test, right?
That's how I was diagnosed, was with positive antibodies.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you think about it, you've got a neurologist who says, well, you must have been misdiagnosed. Well, what's the diagnosis criteria? Well, it's this, and this. Well, I had all that. So you either don't know how to diagnose stuff, or, you can't accept the fact that not eating white food and eating a bunch of meat could potentially cure somebody, which is interesting.
It's quite frustrating because if he would actually take and listen to it, I mean, how many more people could be helped with that information that, maybe a high fat keto or high fat carnivore like is able to heal somebody and cure somebody.
Yeah, see it all the time. This is the thing, and what I'm, the frustration I have is getting funding to pay for the studies that would help to make this more widespread. We're trying, we're working, we're getting there, but it's been a pain, slow slog. And if you came out with rituximab, how much money do they get to spend on those drug trials? Probably tens of millions of dollars. Just because they think they can make more money later at the end. So, I mean, I wonder if, because your insurance company obviously having to pay for this, I mean, they should be giving you a discount now, I think. It seems like.
Right. You would think.
Yeah, something like that. So how'd the rest of the family, when your husband was in there brushing your teeth for you and probably helping you get around the house and all that stuff, how receptive was he to this crazy carnivore thing when you first decided you're going to do this? Because I think you said your son had encouraged you to do it.
Actually, it was my son and my husband both who had been encouraging me. And I actually destroyed my husband's health with the diets that I made him do with me over the years. When we've been married 12 years. And when we first got married, he was a perfect weight and he was healthy, and his cholesterol, he ate butter all the time and he ate bacon all the time. And I told him he was going to kill himself. I'm a child of the 80s and all that low fat stuff. And his mom liked the fat. And so he was raised on it. And so I used to always get mad because cholesterol was always better than mine, even though I ate low fat and he ate all kinds of fat. So over the years, I had him do all these things. And I actually almost think I killed him with vegan, because by the time I got sick and we went off vegan and went back to a normal diet, he was 212 pounds for his 5'7". He was type 2 diabetic. He was on metformin and was depressed and didn't want to get off the couch. And it just, we both worked at the hospital, and he'd go work at the hospital for 8 hours in the OR. And then as soon as he was done, he was done. Like he had nothing left to give. And then he's having to take care of me as well. So I'm happy to say now he has lost 40 pounds and he's off metformin, and his hemoglobin A1C is totally normal. And we just had his fast insulin and glucose done, and his metabolic markers have all gone down. He's amazing. And he's back in the OR, and he, after a 10-hour shift, is still like ready to go. He doesn't come home tired anymore and not spent. So it was a life changer for him. And then my son is in the Space Force. Unfortunately, it makes it very difficult in the military because DFACs don't feed our military people well. So he has to try really hard to stay as much carnivore as he can. The good thing is he finally got stationed at a base that doesn't have it. So he actually has a kitchen in his dorm. So he can make his own food. So he goes to Costco Business Center and buys his primal cuts of ribeye, and he cuts his own meat up, and he tries to stay as carnivore as he can. But it's definitely not easy in the military.
Yeah, well, I spent about 11 years in the military, and I'd have to look. I remember there's a lot of just kind of garbage in those dining facilities. You'd mentioned your husband had always had lower cholesterol than you. Probably, I'm assuming when he was obese and diabetic or pre-diabetic, his cholesterol was still probably relatively low. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. And then it's probably gone up now that he's lost all the weight. Is that a fair statement or no?
Yes, and so I don't really pay a whole lot of attention. Our LDL and total cholesterols are pretty high. I think my last one was almost 300 and his is in the 200s, but I don't really care about that. What I do care about is that both of our triglycerides went down. And my HDL is like my primary care doctor, which I got very lucky. And I have a carnivore primary care doctor. He actually is, in his personal life, is a carnivore. And so he says my HDL is one of the best that he's ever seen. And my husband's is on its way up too. So I guess the only thing that I really care about when I look at our cholesterols are the triglycerides and the HDL, and both of them look great. My husband was always in that, that heart attack risk number that they put you at when they do your cholesterol, and he's not anymore.
Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. Hey, if you or someone you love is suffering from chronic disease and you're tired of just managing symptoms with potions, pills, and procedures, I want you to check out Revero.com. Our team of dedicated professionals is committed to tackling the root cause of your issue and finally getting you healthy. Hurry up, though. Our spaces are filling up very quickly. Yeah, I mean, and this is always a topic that comes up, that the people that are opposed to people doing a diet like this, maybe your risk has gone up because your cholesterol is higher. I would say it's probably nuanced and very much likely to be context dependent, which I think more and more of the literature seems to support. But I mean, if the assumption was that, yes, you've increased your risk for heart disease by 20%, I mean, would it be worth it to you, given the situation you were in before with chronic pain and inability to function? I mean, it seems obvious, but I mean, I'd like to hear it from your own words, I suppose, how you would risk benefit on this sort of situation.
So if it increased my risk of heart attack, and I had to look at having an increased risk of heart attack versus no pain and being able to walk and being able to take care of myself and brush my own teeth and grow my hair out and be able to do the things that were normal to me, I would absolutely take the risk of an increased heart disease over what I was living. Absolutely. And I thought about that when I first went on carnivore, because it's hard to change everything you've been taught when you're in allopathic medicine for over 20 years. And it's really, really hard to let all of that noise go, that I'm going to kill myself. And, and then listening to my coworkers and my peers and the doctors that I worked with at the hospital, they're, very, very few completely supported it. They were very, a lot of people said, this is probably not healthy. Now, I did have some, like our CMO at our hospital was absolutely behind it. He was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to watch you because my wife is a vegetarian and I would love to get her off of the vegetarian and onto meat because she's always sick. So like, people did listen and watch, but for the most part, there wasn't a whole lot of support in my professional world because this isn't normal. And I did hear that a lot. Well, aren't you worried about a heart attack? And aren't you worried about stroke and all of this stuff? And I'm not, I don't have any pain. I mean, I'm not 100%, and I have residual pain. And as I come off gabapentin, my pain goes up for a little while and then it comes back down. But I don't live with the pain that I used to live with. And so, yeah, I would take a heart attack over the pain any day.
Yeah, and I guess to be clear, because people might wonder about the gabapentin, and it's not something you can stop right away. You have to have this long taper process, or you can precipitate like seizures and things like that. I mean, it's not a thing you can just quit overnight like some medications are. And fortunately, you have, like you said, you have a primary care physician that's supportive. And that's hard to come by. This is one of the reasons we started Revero, is so we have doctors that kind of get this stuff. Let me ask you, because you said you went vegan for a period of time. That was in an effort to help with the gastroparesis. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe not. How did you feel on vegan? Was it about the same as everything else? Worse, better? What were you noticing when you did that one?
Okay, so I'll be completely honest. It was a documentary that made me go vegan. I watched Forks Over Knives, and they talk about how it's a healthier thing and stuff. And so we did whole food, no fat. Like, basically was the vegan that we went on. And I, at the time, was weightlifting, and I never could get rid of, there was always this layer of fat around my midsection I could never get rid of, no matter how, I wasn't eating any fat, and I was trying to figure out why I couldn't do that. I look back now, I've just been able to start lifting weights again. They're nothing where I was at when I got sick, but at least I am able to do it. And I look at what I'm eating now and how fast I'm putting muscle back on. And I worked out forever on vegan and couldn't get that muscle on. So I am seeing huge changes in the way that I am now compared to the way I was when I was vegan. If I had known then what I know now, I would have never done vegan. And I probably would have been healthier. And then I always questioned, was vegan the one thing that caused my autoimmune disease to turn on? There's you have to have lifestyle, you have to have genetics, and you have to have something that turns it on? And was it vegan that turned it on? I won't ever know, but I still have to question what I thought I was at optimal health. I wasn't.
Yeah, just the timing on that. You went vegan for a period of time, and then how long after the vegan experiment did you develop this CIDP?
We had been vegan for a year, and I had only just, like, within the last few weeks of before I got sick, I had just added fish back in and seafood. So we had been vegan for a year. And the problem with CIDP is that it actually takes months to come on. And what I thought when I was lifting weights and I was having grip strength issues, I thought that my grip strength just wasn't strong enough for the weights I was using because they were heavy. I was going heavier and heavier with weights, and I thought maybe my grip strength wasn't good. So I started working on my grip strength. Hindsight, I had started months before that losing my grip strength and losing some of the function. You just think that it's something else. You never think that, hey, this is something that's coming on. And when I was not one single eating way that we did, any of them helped my gastroparesis. I mean, I just learned how to deal with the pain. I learned how to eat at certain times. I used heat on my stomach all the time after I ate to try to, get the blood flowing and get things moving. And it wasn't until I went on carnivore that I had zero symptoms of gastroparesis now. I have no bloating. And I used to think that it was the meat when I ate the meat that made me the most bloated, but I have no bloating. I have no nausea. I haven't vomited. Nothing since I went on carnivore.
Wow. That's awesome. So it sounds like while you were vegan, you're getting weakness in your hand, you probably did start developing the CIDP, and you were low fat, whole foods. It wasn't a junk food vegan diet. And so goodness, I wonder, maybe you know this because I don't know off the top of my head, because gastroparesis is often a neurological issue with, the way the stomach, stomach that's kind of paralyzed. Is CIDP, is gastroparesis a feature of CIDP, or can it be? Do you know?
Gastroparesis can be. And that was initially, like, as soon as I was diagnosed with CIDP, I was like, oh, well, maybe. But if I go back and really think about it, I was diagnosed the same time another nurse I worked with at the hospital. Her and I were metabolically kind of the same. We'd both had migraines our entire life. We both had a lot of the same walk in life. And we were diagnosed with idiopathic gastroparesis at the same time. We'd both gotten sick at the same time. And so her gastroenterologist, she went to University of California, San Diego, or San Francisco, I think, and I stayed in Hawaii. But our gastroenterologists both said that there was no way we both got idiopathic gastroparesis without being exposed to something. So the going theory was that probably we had a patient with Epstein-Barr or something like that we were exposed to, that it just went in and hit both of our vagus nerves. But they said that there was no way it was just a coincidence that both of us were diagnosed at the same time. And we worked in the same unit.
Yeah, and I think I know your answer because we discussed this previously, but your thoughts on going back to allopathic medicine at this point as a nurse who spent, a whole career there?
No. When I started nursing, I started off in trauma ICU, and then I moved into pediatric ICU. And from there, I went to a pediatric emergency department. And then I've been an oncology certified nurse. I've done med-surg management, and then I was a nursing supervisor, and then moved into administration stuff. And the only time that I felt like I was truly healing people was when I worked in trauma ICU, because they came in with trauma. And you can heal trauma, right? And then in the pediatric ICU, I did open hearts for babies with congenital heart defects. So we're healing them, in essence, and sending them home. Once I moved into oncology, the healing stopped. And I stayed in oncology for pretty close to about 3 years. And in 1 year, I lost over 300 patients. And I used to keep track of all the patients that I lost. And I just my heart couldn't do that anymore. So, but I look back now and I see the revolving door that we just put patients in. They would come in and need to have pulmonary toileting, like they're CHF and they're full of fluid, and we would take and get that fluid off, send them home, and then they'd be back 2 weeks later. And then a big holiday would happen and they would overindulge on all of the foods, and then they would be back in the hospital. Or they would come in and get toes amputated. And the next time we saw them, they got the whole foot. And the next time we saw them, they were doing a below the knee amputation. And we never were healing them. And I truly believe a hospital should be for trauma and acute illness, and that's it. We shouldn't be having to treat chronic illness in hospitals. It's insane, because that's all we do now is treat chronic illnesses. And so no, I'm not going back to allopathic medicine. I finished my functional medicine already, and I'm finishing my hours right now to be a board certified nurse coach. And I intend on spending the rest of my nursing career helping others find healing instead of controlling symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah. We do have a lot of that symptom, disease management. I can remember somewhere, I started in medicine in 1989 when I first started medical school. And I don't know when this term disease management came in vogue, somewhere in maybe the late 90s, early 2000s. And I was like, what does that mean? And it was just, you just medicate people for the rest of their lives. And I mean, it's interesting because the cancer, such a high loss rate in the cancer center. And the cancer centers, infusion centers are huge money-making profit centers for hospital. I mean, these things are just hand over fist. They rake in a lot of money with these infusion centers. Same thing with like dialysis centers and cath labs. And what I did as an orthopedic surgeon, a lot of money in there. And yet most of the people are dying, and I don't know how much you're extending their life. Probably not extending their quality of life very long. Where was I going to go from here? So, you'd mentioned at some point, and I don't think I caught this from the last time we talked, you were very depressed and even thought about suicide and something like that. How has this diet impacted your mental health?
So my first suicide attempt, I was in middle school. And my second one, I was in nursing school. So that was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I had been in the military. I was in the military in the late 90s, and I was in the reserves when 9/11 happened. And then I was called back to active duty. So when I was in my first year of nursing school, I was trying to juggle being in the military again and nursing school. And I was really lucky. I had a chief in my unit that allowed me to finish school. So I was doing both. And then I was in a marriage that wasn't amazing. And so I had that second suicide period, and it took going on Prozac to get pulled out of that suicide. So, and then I'd always had a low level anxiety. I'd been on Xanax for years for it. I think it was only in the first month. The first month I went off the and I was on duloxetine and nortriptyline for the nerve. It's supposed to make the gabapentin work better. But I always joked around that I made it through those 5 years because gabapentin, duloxetine, and nortriptyline all work on your mental health as well. And so I always joke that the only reason I made it through was because the pain medicine that was for my nerves also was treating my depression. And so within the first month, my depression was gone. I had a very serious phobia of flying, and I couldn't get on a plane without like 2 milligrams of Xanax. And that's a lot of Xanax for anybody who doesn't know. 2 milligrams is a crazy amount of Xanax. And we flew out to Arizona to look at houses in June. And we started eating carnivore the end of March. And in June, we flew out here to look at houses, and I took nothing to get on the plane. Had 0 panic attacks, my heart rate barely even bumped up. And that was the first time since the early 2000s I was able to get on a plane and not freak out or be so sedated that I didn't have any reason to freak out. So and my depression now I would say my depression is completely gone. My anxiety, like if I don't eat as much fat as I normally eat on a daily basis, and I kind of start letting that fat slack off, I notice that my anxiety kind of starts creeping back in. And my husband will even say like, hey, I don't think you're eating enough fat because you've got some anxiety things going on. And I had OCD since I was a teenager too. And I have 0 OCD tendencies now. My youngest son got OCD and anxiety. He was diagnosed really early on in his life. And I'm still trying to convince him to become a carnivore, but he's a freshman in Honolulu. And Apparently, vending machines take credit cards now because I pay a whole lot of money every month on my credit card for vending machines. But he's a college student, and he works out and he lifts weights and he tries to eat as much protein. But once again, he's on a meal plan at the university, and the food it's not all that great. So he ends up eating junk.
Yeah, hopefully he can come around. One other thing I think I remember you saying is that you were in Hawaii during COVID. You have this Guillain-Barré-like syndrome, which, and you, as you know, Guillain-Barré often occurs after vaccinations, and you were sort of, I guess, forced to be vaccinated even despite this potentially problematic condition that you had. And then you got COVID. Sounds like you got COVID a couple times anyway, because you're immunosuppressed from rituximab. Sounds like, is that correct? How that happened?
So yes, I was forced to get the first 2 vaccines, and I probably could have fought it and gotten a letter from my neurologist, but my neurologist wanted me to get it. And so unfortunately, my first bout of COVID was actually the Delta variant. I had gotten when we were in the middle of Delta to Omicron, I had gotten COVID then, and it took me a month to bounce back from that one. And I missed an entire month of work for that one. And I think I had it 1 or 2 more times. And then in July of 23, I flew out to Alabama to go to FEMA training for hospital response. I was in charge of our emergency management program at our hospital. So I went and did FEMA training, came home from the FEMA training, got COVID, and that was when I almost died. I refused to go to the hospital though. I could barely breathe. And my husband wanted to take me to the hospital. And I said, if I'm going to die, I'd rather die at home than die in the hospital. And I don't want them to put me on a vent because I'll never get off the vent. I've watched this progression. I know what's going to happen. So I don't think that I did not get any more COVID shots after the original 2 that I was forced to get. And I haven't had a flu shot since I got sick because you're right. It is a Guillain-Barré variant. And, most Guillain-Barrés come from vaccines. And so I'm not going to risk it. And I wasn't going to. So I will never get vaccinated again in my life, because why would I want to risk anything reactivating? But I don't think that the vaccine helped me any. I still had COVID a gazillion times.
Yeah, that seems to be a common finding. I've seen it again. I know that's a very controversial and emotionally laden topic for a lot of people. I personally didn't get it just because I was like, I'm healthy. I don't need it, and wasn't worried about it. But so your husband's still working in the OR. Is he still working in the OR? What does he do in the OR? Is he a nurse in the OR? What does he do?
He's a surgical first assist.
Oh, he's a first assist. Okay, cool. So probably, that's not a bad job, actually.
He loves it. He doesn't have to be a doctor, but he gets to do all the fun stuff like the doctor.
Yeah. I had a pretty good assist when I was doing orthopedics, and yeah, she had a way better lifestyle than I did. I got to tell you, and probably got paid pretty well too. But so you'd mentioned, like CIDP Foundation, and this is, what I see with all of these patient advocacy groups and foundations. Whether it's American Heart Association, American Diabetes Association, the National Ataxia Foundation, all these sort of somewhat more obscure diseases, it seems like they're all sort of, as you'd mentioned, basically vehicles to advertise drugs to their members. Is that what you found in those groups?
Yes, and actually, the way I find out there is a new drug for my disease, and the way I find out is I get emails from the foundation saying, "Hey, look, there's a new drug," but nowhere on the foundations do they talk about diet. Do they talk about lifestyle changes? They do advocate for like trying to keep exercise up as much as possible to try not to lose what you have, but nowhere, maybe there's a little bit of plant-based stuff in there somewhere, but nowhere do people advocate and say, "Hey, wait, instead of trying this drug, try eating this way." And that's the sad part. And if I went on there, I'm sure I'd get kicked out of the chat groups if I was advocating for, "Hey, there's a cure, there's a way to heal yourself." Like, go for it. And I actually, early on in my carnivore journey, met a lady from Vietnam through an Instagram group who has cured CIDP. And she's 3 years out from going carnivore. And she said that at the 3 year mark, she was 100% back to her baseline before she had gotten sick.
That's encouraging. Yeah, that's certainly because, as you know, I mean, the demyelination, chronic inflammatory demyelinating, polyneuropathy. So a lot of nerves, translate chronically inflamed, and demyelination. And myelin is that sheath that covers a nerve, which helps with the conduction of the nerve signal. And so you've lost a bunch of myelin, and it just takes a while for your body to remyelinate itself. And I know with, like, as an orthopedic surgeon, when we dealt with nerve injury, we know the progression. Like if you cut someone's radial nerve at their, fixing their tricep, fixing their humerus, you've got another, foot and a half, 18 inches of nerve, and it's like 1 millimeter a week. So you think about how long does it take, for that to, now obviously it's probably patchy where you've got missing myelin throughout the nerve. But yeah, I can see where it could take a couple of years to get full neurologic recovery from this. But as you get more and more, ability, then you get stronger and stronger. And sounds like, you have minimal pain, the gabapentin you're weaning off every 3 months or so. And how much neural deficit do you have with regard to motor or sensory still?
My, like, doing repetitive motions with my hands, I still tire out and still get a little bit of pain. I notice my handwriting is getting better again. I can actually read what I write again. So that's a huge thing. Typing is getting easier. And there's still, like, I used to make jewelry. I still can't. I don't have that. But with occupational therapy, we work on those fine motor skills. I never will go back to allopathic medicine, but I'll bet you I could start an IV again. And I haven't been able to do that for 5 years. So I'm gaining some of that. As far as my gross motor skills, I'm doing great. I'm able to lift weights again, and I try to walk every single day and do that. So gross motor skills are great. That's that fine motor skills that I'm still working on, and I'm okay with it taking time. It took me 5 years to get where I am right now, so I know it's not going to be overnight to get back, but I look at where I'm at though, and I'm not using a cane. I have our first year carniversary is next month. We haven't even been in this a year, and I'm already a million times better than I was this time last year. This time last year, I would lay in bed and cry all the time because I was just done. And so it's going to take it, nobody really knows because you are right. There's no studies. There's no, we just have each other's stories and each other's, healing. So it could take a couple of years. The myelin sheets are made out of cholesterol, right? It's all fat. So I try to eat 80% fat, and I do watch my macros just to make sure I'm getting that 80% fat in because I want to heal my nerves as fast as I can.
Yeah, I mean, the studies I've seen on remyelination, and I've seen some, at least animal studies suggesting that you cannot have remyelination in the absence of exogenous cholesterol. And the only place you get exogenous cholesterol is, of course, through animal products. They're not contained in plant products. And so that is, it's consistent with what's going on with you. You've got your handle Eating Meat to Walk, so you're on social media. Have you been approached by other people with either CIDP or other sort of neurological issues that have been, have shared their stories with you?
Yes, actually, I have quite a few. I have made quite a few contacts with people who are working on their MS and working on Parkinson's. And I actually have one other lady who's in her 40s that I've been talking to on Instagram who has CIDP. And she is in the very early stages of looking at carnivore and, asks a lot of appropriate questions, but people are still skeptical. And I guess you're not going to know until you do it that it's going to help you. But yeah, I have met a lot of people with chronic illnesses, and I work with Healing Humanity and Carrie Mann, and it's absolutely an amazing group. And I'm doing group coaching right now with them. And there's so many people out there who are suffering, but there's so many people out there who have found healing in carnivore, and hearing their stories, it it keeps that flame ignited that, yes, we're on the right path, and yes, we're doing the right thing and helping others heal. And so I go looking for interview opportunities. I have a YouTube channel. I'm trying, but I don't interview other people and stuff. It's all about my journey. And so I never turn an interview down because I want people to hear this. And I don't care if it's just one person who hears this interview and says, wait, that sounds a lot like my journey. Maybe I need to do this, or maybe I need to not give up, because there's been a few times through my carnivore journey that I've been like, maybe this isn't doing it, like a bad pain day. But my husband will remind me that my bad pain days now are nothing like my bad pain days used to be. And you kind of forget, right? It's that we protect our brains by forgetting how bad it was, because we don't want to go back there. So even my bad days now are nothing compared to, my bad day now is like a good day back when I was sick.
You mentioned you moved to Arizona, and you got to find a primary physician that's supportive of carnivore. Are you still involved with a neurologist?
I do have a neurologist here in Arizona. He's the one that told me I was in remission. I debated when I moved here whether I was going to set up a neurologist or not, and then I decided that I probably should, because I never know what will happen. I'd rather have one on standby than not have one. So I do have a neurologist here at the Center for Neurosciences in Tucson, and they actually do clinical trials there. So, and every time I see him, he's like, "Are you sure you don't want to do your rituximab? You're way overdue." I'm sure. Now he's actually he told me he only needs to see me once a year now, just to check in and make sure that everything is good.
Yeah, no, I can't remember if I asked you this before, but obviously you had the EMGs, the nerve conduction velocity studies, electromyograms, the antibody levels, all of which are objective. It's not just subjective stuff. And of course, obviously your ability to function is pretty much objective as well. Were there MRIs, and do MRIs fall into the diagnostic algorithm for diagnosing this disease? And if so, have you had repeat MRIs?
So MRIs don't show anything. And I had my entire body MRI'd when I first got sick, but the diagnostics are cerebral spinal fluid with the antibodies in it, EMGs, and the antibodies in the blood. And then all the rest is clinical. It's, there's only 3 things that they can actually show it that are not clinically based. And so I had missing reflexes that should have been there. So they were able to, look at the reflexes, look at the way I walked, looked at my gait, did all the full neurological exam, and nothing was normal. And so that, when they first did that, I saw a neurologist within 3 days of getting sick, because I already had it set up for migraine appointment. So I just went in and I said, I don't care about my migraines. I can't walk. And so I had that done. I ended up seeing 2 neurologists and a rheumatologist before they figured out where I was at. And the really sad thing was when I saw the rheumatologist and she decided that she didn't know what was wrong with me, she diagnosed me with fibromyalgia, because she said, well, I can't figure out anything else, so it's got to be fibromyalgia. And then that kind of, I remember getting on the phone just sobbing, because I was like, I don't have fibromyalgia. I don't have I wasn't tired. I just couldn't walk. So it's very frustrating. And thank goodness I'm a nurse. And I was able to keep advocating for myself. No, I'm not going to let you just diagnose with fibromyalgia and tell me to go on with my life.
Yeah. Migraines, are they better too, by the way?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we are unfortunately out of time. Renee, thank you so much for doing this again. And like I said, I definitely have got the recording going. So we'll get this out here in the very near future. Share where people can find you.
I am on YouTube and Instagram, and it's at Eating Meat to Walk on both of them.
At Eating Meat to Walk. Awesome. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baker.